Check one, two, three. Hey everybody, it's Michael Helms, also known as Michael the Sound Guy, and this is the Location Sound Podcast. You know, each episode we talk with location sound mixers, boom ops, and other industry pros about the various aspects of recording sound on location, whether it's for feature and independent films, TV commercials, interviews, any time where dialogue from actors is recorded. I started my career in the recording studios in New York City with some of the big artists back in the day, and later on projects for networks like HBO, Sci-Fi Channel, and the Cartoon Network. As time went by, I got out of the studio and began working in production sound. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, thanks for joining us. My guest today is a freelance production sound mixer and boom op based out of Los Angeles, California. Please welcome Stephen Harrod.
Hello.
Hey, Stephen, how are you?
I am okay. It's a Sunday in Los Angeles. Who could complain, right?
Perfect. Hey, we always like to kick things off by asking what's in your audio kit. So kind of give us an overview of what's in your bag.
Which one? I have many bags. That's not true. I only have like 2. But I think not originally. Currently now, what I usually rock is the Sound Devices 633, and then I've got some Electro SRBs in there, block 19 and 20, and I mean, it depends on the job, of course. That's kind of my big boy rig, because a lot of the kind of work I'm doing is corporate E&G type of stuff when I'm mixing, and then I'll get the occasional narrative here and there. And then the other bag that I like to use is the Mix Pre 10T, which we were talking about earlier, for the lightweight type of stuff. And with that, I'll kind of swap the SRBs, and then I'll use like G3s for hops and some tentacles if they need some time code, and then the kind of shotgun mics or hypercardioids that I'll use. We got the Sennheiser family. You got the 416, you got the 50, you got the 60, and then other mics that I carry around. I got, the Rode NTG. That was like the second mic I ever bought. So for sentimental value, and because I'm somewhat of a pack rat, especially when it comes to gear, I hang on to those because, you never know. And I have a few Deity mics because I actually was kind of repping for them when they were still under the Aperture name brand. So they came out with a mic, and I helped kind of design that with kind of a collective of other people. And then they branched off and became Deity, so I have a few of those in my kit as well.
Well, let's kind of maybe do a little deeper dive in the way you have your mixer set up. So say you're using your 633s. What is your channel setup like? So your boom is on channel what?
My boom's on 1. 99% of the time. I think the only time I would ever change it up would be if I'm doing like a wireless rig, if I'm doing like a narrative and and then I have an op, and it's just easier in that way. But boom is always on 1. The SRBs, the Electros are always on 2 and 3. And then if I'm getting up to more, it's pretty consecutive in that way. And then occasionally I have on 6, on input 6 on the 633, I will have a dynamic microphone so that I can talk to the op.
Okay. Now, when you're sending your hops out, what do you do?
Yeah, I'm out of left and right for most of that. It's coming out of the left, and if I have like a Comtech transmitter, it's probably coming out of the right, or sometimes I'm using those TA3s, which are great as well. And that's usually the routing for that type of thing. Or sometimes not at all. Sometimes I'm just sending time code, and I let the scratch track or the internal mic on the cameras do all the work if they have those, if it's like a dock or that type of thing. Because, I mean, that stuff's come a long way, too. I've talked with some of my editor friends, and they're like, the sync now versus what it was in, like, DSLR days, it's, as my understanding, it's heads and tails above what it used to be in terms of, matching waveforms and everything.
Yeah. I did a job recently, and we had, I think there were 2 red cameras and they didn't want any hops on there. They just want to stay light. They were on like an easy rig kind of setup.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is that you have to coordinate that, and they're like, you know, they look at you and I don't want any of this, and it better not be over this poundage, but yeah.
Yeah, I ended up just putting a couple of tentacles on one on each camera, and that worked out good.
Right, and they love it, and you love it. It's, you know, no hassle, so everybody's happy, and it syncs up. Fingers crossed within that, and yeah, it just whatever is easier to get the job done. I mean, and again, it's so much based on the types of jobs too, and you know, to keep up with like the cameras as well. I mean, remember when that Red One came out?
Yeah,
It took like a minute, I think, to boot up, and you know, that was like a weird connection for a microphone too. That was like a mini TA. It wasn't even a TA3. It was some kind of mini XLR or something.
I'm trying to remember too. Yeah, because a lot of them just have the little 3.5 millimeter jack, and
yeah, which is only line level or mic level or something like that. I think that was like the Scarlett or something. But now they have internal. Somebody got the memo over there at Red, bless their hearts, of maybe we should have microphones on here so that, you know, they don't have to run all this extra stuff onto it.
Exactly. Well, let's see here. You worked on a Netflix show called Saturday Morning All-Star Hits. Tell us about that one.
Oh my gosh, I did. That was great. We shot in, what was it? What was last year? It was around June 2021. That was with Kyle Mooney. I was hired by a mixer named Tom Pizzicolin, who's a great guy who I've known for many years out here in Los Angeles. He's from Pennsylvania. I say that because I'm from the East Coast originally, so not that I have a bias for that. It's just nice to know East Coast people out on the West Coast because you can kind of connect on that level. Anyways, he hired me for I think 4 or 5 days. And Kyle Mooney, for those of you who don't know, he kind of got a start, I believe, on YouTube, doing some kind of alternative humor. And then he eventually wound up on SNL. And he's really kind of kept his alternative sense of humor, I'd say, because I think so much of his sketches aren't aired, and they're put like in a segment on YouTube called Cut for Time, which really shows it, you know, to me, it sounds like they're like, oh, well, Kyle's got one of his sketches again. We don't want to air it on the show, but we'll just put it on YouTube or whatever. He had his own thing going on for Netflix that I think was like a throwback to the 90s. Yeah, I was there for half the shooting, and then Roger Keane did the rest of it. Great boom up, who I also came up with. And we were doing a lot of the exteriors. What's funny, it always happens to me, I want to say, for certain shows, but I think I talked to Tom afterwards about it, and he was like, yeah, the rest of it ran pretty smoothly. It was really only those first, 4 or 5 days. I was like, oh, the ones I was on, those were like why is that always happening? It's fine though. I'll do it gratefully. Yeah, that's on Netflix. I haven't seen it. Have you? I haven't.
I just actually watched a trailer for it, and I thought it was looked like it was pretty fast, high energy, kind of crazy.
Well, because the crazy thing about that was that he plays another character in it. If I'm remembering right, he's like, there's twin characters. So we were doing I'm totally blanking on the name. Like a motion control camera when you have two characters in it. So we were doing that kind of stuff. And then we also needed earwigs because he was reacting to himself saying the lines of his other character. And, in true production fashion, we were not informed about that until day of. So Tom, being the amazing mixer he is, had a lot of that stuff on hand and was prepped for it. But, there were definitely some curveballs that were getting thrown in that way. And that was, multi-camera type of shoot. So much of it was that the stuff that we were doing that I was there for was Kyle doing his own thing and kind of reacting with other characters, but so much of it was him acting with himself. So there were definitely a few... there were some hurdles to get over in that regard. Plus, we were on the move for a lot of it. We were at a few different locations, Griffith Park, the beach. There was a lot of hustling and bustling that we had to do within that. So you really had to, you're on your feet, moving around a lot, just seeing what was going to change or what they were going to throw at you.
Any particular booming challenges that show had?
I mean, I think, the always the thing about booming for me is making sure that I'm getting familiar with all the appropriates around set. I mean, the camera people, and I mean, the lighting people, and just making sure that I'm in their good graces, because these are people that you're going to be working with, if not for the day, then for weeks, months, whatever. And you want them to be on your side, and they want to be on your side, hopefully, because it is, especially for narrative, it is a collaborative thing. And I feel like, I don't know if it gets taught in schools, but they make it this kind of, sometimes I feel like this departmental divide of this department and that, but the thing about that is, at the end of the day, we're, especially in the narrative world, we're all trying to make this thing work in the best way possible. And if you don't have the cooperation and collaboration of every department, then it's not going to be as successful, and you're not going to be able to pull it off to the best of your abilities. So in trying to think about like a specific difficulty within that, I can't really recall. So it must have been okay then, right? I mean, or at least I walked in with the right attitude, because the ones that I can think of that might have been difficult, I think, there might not have been cooperation from all departments, and there might have been something wrong with the production. And I mean, all of that stuff trickles down, that we've seen, is if, or it's like the analogy of the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I mean, you can break that down into all the different departments too, as if this department's getting in trouble, or if there's a talent in this certain way. I mean, it all kind of affects the mass blob that is the movie or the show that you're doing. So it's important to try to be on the same page with everybody, and that's really the approach that I try to bring to every show. It doesn't happen all the time either, but that's hopefully the through line that you kind of have to see.
Yeah. Well, give us an example of when things maybe didn't go quite right. You don't have to say any names or anything.
There was this independent feature that I was on. I think it was last year. We were shooting at the beach for the majority of the time, and talking about, what I was saying earlier about people being on the same page. I think the director, who was a first-time director, he had come from a photography world, and I think he was very in tune with what he wanted, because so much of the time when you are a photographer, is my understanding, depending on the size of the shoots, but you're doing everything yourself. You're moving lights, you have the vision in your head, and you have the camera, and you can just click, and that's it. Whereas in this case, when you had, we were in indie, so it was like 30 or 40 people, but when you have all these people at your fingertips reach, who are doing all of these extra things, I can understand how it might be frustrating in that regard. So I think there was definitely a lack of communication within that, of the director and the DP, about getting specifically what they needed. And as you know, there's the trickle down of that, if that's not communicated correctly to everybody else from the set, we're all running around with our heads cut off. And, people get worked up and anxious about that, and it just ends up kind of being a mess in that regard. And I mean, I think that's kind of, each show or each project to a degree is kind of its own mess, and you just kind of have to see where you are within that and how you handle it and what kind of mess it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street, and I'm trying to remember if I don't know, maybe it's within my personality, but sometimes I feel bad or like guilty that I have to ask the AD or whomever, I'm like, what are we doing next, or what's going on? But at the same time, it's like, depending on, the learning curve of whatever the project is and how stuff is, being laid out for everybody, you kind of have to do that on a shot per shot basis sometimes, because it all moves incredibly fast. And as my understanding, I'm kind of a younger man in the biz, so I don't remember what it was like with film and everything. But I mean, I know in school, at least when we shot film, I went to Columbia College Chicago, where they shot film. I still don't know if they do that anymore. But anyways, they fine-tuned it. You honed it in because you only had so many takes, and It's been interesting for me to talk to other people, elders, I will say, who have been around the block and they were shooting film, and you didn't have digital, and you couldn't just roll forever and do the rolling resets. You fine-tuned it and you practiced it so that you got the one or three that you needed, and that was it. And now with so much of that liberty, there's more room for not as finite tuning.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about George Harrison's "My Sweet Lord."
Oh my gosh, that was amazing. Again, shout out to Tom again for not being able to do that particular project. He was on another show, Hunters. He was on Bigger and Better Things, hanging out with Al Pacino, and I got to hang out with Mark Hamill and Fred Armisen for the few days that they had. I say few days, it was like a day total combined, because the stuff that I did with Fred was just like one day, not even a full day, like 4 hours. And then the stuff we did with Mark was another day. Very small. It was me and a few lighting people and the director, Lester Bangs. And yeah, it was very small and concise, and not concise, I mean very free form. And, they were doing this whole story for that. And I was glad to be a part of it because I love the Beatles. Who doesn't? There are some people that don't, surprisingly. But that's okay. This isn't for them. The music video is not for them. Then,
So it's just like a remake of the video?
not a remake. I don't know if he actually made an official video of it, but yeah, I think the idea within it is that they're looking for something within it. Fred and this cast of many. I think the idea, if I were to interpret as such, possible spoilers for those of you who haven't seen it, but the goodness and the amazingness that is George, that is music, that is loving music, it's all around you and it's right there the whole time, and you don't have to look for it. That's what I would take out of it. And I think it was done through, I want to say, a parent company of Absolutely Productions, which is Tim Heidecker and Eric Wareham's. And as my understanding, Tim is a huge Beatles fan, so they took that on themselves to make it happen. And as I had said before, I'm a huge Beatles fan, so to be a part of that was very special. And I'm glad to say that's happened now. Of some of the things that I've worked on in the past 4 years, I'd say, are things that I would legitimately enjoy even if I hadn't worked on them. And I think that's a good space to be in.
Yeah. I'd say, every project you work on, I think you learn something new. This was kind of interesting, something you didn't know about. And, it's all over the place. You've got, I worked on this thing recently, and it has to do with the space program and rescue and all this stuff with and I was like, this is so cool, and you just never would have known something like that even existed. So,
yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you get kind of these glimpses of, or these slices of other people's lives in this way that you never thought about. Maybe you take it for granted in some ways of how these things work, or kind of these larger things that are responsible for this or the other thing. But being kind of behind the scenes in that and understanding how it works, it gives you kind of a better just overall appreciation for it, hopefully, on the good days. Sometimes you're there just for the paycheck, but if you're really in on it and you're all in, then you can get something out of it, yeah.
Exactly. Well, okay, something else, the cleaner, you were boom op on that?
Yeah, that was a feature that came out was last year, I think October, even though we shot that a while ago. I mean, you know how it is. You get you shoot something and maybe you don't hear about it for 5 years, and then they're like, oh, it's finally getting, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was kind of I want to say we shot that in 2018. That was a bit, yeah. A lot of my fellow alumni, I say that, though, I don't remember any of them. I think we went to school at different times, but I think there was 5 of us from Columbia College Chicago that worked on that. That was fun. We had Mr. M.H. Douglas. He was mixer on that. He's very helpful. I mean, I think like so many people, I don't know if this probably gets said on here, but I'm very fortunate in the people that I get to work with, and they help me, and I try to help them. And that was one of the ones that got me my days to be in the union out here. And, as a credit to Monson, Douglas, who was the mixer on that, he boomed a movie just recently called Come On, Come On with Joaquin Phoenix, and just the types of people that you get to work with, and we all kind of fanboy out, essentially. I mean, when I started to see stuff about that, I was texting him like, oh, you worked on that? That's amazing. Or he told me about it first, and then when I started to see advertising for it, I was like, that's the movie that you worked on? But anyways, yeah, so he mixed that. We were out in Eagle Rock for a lot of it, in like a trailer park area. You got a gentleman in the lead of that. His name's King Orba. Great guy. He's actually a props person as well. We had some kind of Hollywood royalty in the sense of we had Hopper Penn, Sean's kid, James Paxton, Bill's kid, and Ian Brolin, Josh's kid. And so they were all there and super great, super approachable. No allusions to who their parents were. Just, down to earth, really cool people. And again, that's ideally what you want. And you don't always get that. But given that we were also a very independent thing, again, everybody's kind of got to play ball or else, nothing's going to get done.
Yeah. Now, depending on the sound mixer you're working with, what's your preferred setup when you're on boom?
Usually I'm just listening to the boom. Occasionally I'll ask to hear the whole mix. I mean, so much of it is about like the communication that I establish with the mixer. And again, I've been fortunate in the mixers that I've gotten to work with. They're always super helpful, and we've had a rapport with each other. I learned a tremendous lot from a former boom op, now mixer, named Anthony Ortiz. He had 30 years of experience booming before switching to mixing, and I was kind of there out of happenstance to be his boom op on this independent thing where he was really testing the waters as his mixer. This is in 2017, something like that. And so he had so much experience that he could kind of not necessarily explain or teach me, but it was all in the way that he handled himself that was just tremendously influential to me. I mean, including stuff of like just his rapport and candor with everybody on set, and just the way that he approached people. And so I learned a lot from that in terms of kind of just setting up a shot in itself. And we would look at the shot, and if you have, hopefully you're going to be able to see the blocking or whatever. And in this case, we would look at the shot, and then we'd watch it, and then he'd be like, all right, how do you want to do this? Or what do you think about this? And that's always kind of been my through line for me. And it's amazing, because I sometimes help out on student shoots or even some other, I guess, allegedly big shoots where that doesn't happen. And it's, again, I think that goes back to that we're kind of in this digital realm and we just get whatever we get. And I understand that sometimes there's a styles type of thing of maybe the director and whomever wants to just shoot it and see what happens, which is fine as long as everybody is just on the same page within that. But, I've been so fortunate in kind of the people that I've gotten to work with and sponge off of in terms of the things that I want to pick up and take forward with me to whatever the next gig is.
Nice. Now, did you always want to work in the sound department?
Jumping way back, I was a theater kid in high school. I think there's a lot of carryover from that sometimes in the industry too. But I was a theater kid. I was an actor. I was okay at it. I guess people liked me. My dad liked me. But I wanted to go to college for that, but then I realized there's a lot better people here than me that I think want it more and have just clearly are just better versed in it. And I had been messing around with documentary filmmaking in high school on my own, kind of documenting the plays that we were doing. And so I kind of had that technical aspect. And by kind of, I mean, I was learning it all myself. I mean, I didn't go on YouTube or try to do anything like that. I mean, I think a lot of the ways that I learned to do filmmaking type of stuff was watching making ofs, on DVDs and stuff. So you had like Lord of the Rings and Jurassic Park. So I was very much interested in the filmmaking process along with acting. But how that took me to sound was, I remember, I think the first sound job I had, the first job I got paid for was in 2006. There was somebody on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I'm from Maryland originally, and they were doing a documentary thing. And it was this river baptism type of thing. And they needed somebody to, I think their words were like, hold the microphone. I don't even know if boom operator was in the description of the title, but I was tethered to I think it was like a JVX camera, and we were shooting this baptism scene in the water, and I was just instructed, obviously, don't drop the mic into the water and get what you can get. And that was the first sound job I had where I got paid $20. I don't know. That's money well spent, I'm sure. But cut to getting into film school and learning about the filmmaking process, and I kind of went back to that idea of sound more because there is a thread to this that I remember we had kind of like a job fair at my school of like signing up for roles on set, and so you had script supervisor, grip, and we had somebody talking about what the specific jobs were. And I remember this person talking about what the boom operator did, and they were saying, "Oh, you're right in the action, and you get to see how the directors work with the actors, and you're kind of in the scene. Not literally, of course, hopefully not, but you're there where all the action is." And what I kind of remember about that was that nobody wanted to do that job. I think because a lot of people can't get over the fact that you're holding a stick over your head for a long time. At least that's how it's perceived. And, maybe short way, yeah, that's kind of what the job is, but it's also not. But I think subconsciously or something, I kind of drew from being that theater kid in that background of acting and understanding how blocking worked from like the stage level. And I think some of that kind of transposed itself for me into the idea, particularly for narrative, of you're watching the scene and you're seeing how these people are interacting with each other, and you're seeing where the camera's going, and it is symbiotic, I guess, in that way of what you're trying to, you're there to capture the performance, but you're also very closely looking at the different nuances of what everybody is doing. And I think that was what attracted me to it.
Yeah, I always talk about, you're in the splash zone. You're right in there. It's like, it's
Yeah.
you're not on camera, but you're right there.
Yeah. Hopefully you're not within the production. But yeah, it's for sure a splash zone, and it's I think it's not I don't think it's everybody's ideal way of fun, because I was teaching at a camp for a while with students about the filmmaking process, and I think a lot of people, that's the last job they want to do is the boom operator thing. But I'm like, but you're there, you're in it, you're like, you're not in the scene, but you're following it all, and it's up to you to make sure that we're hearing all that great crispy dialogue. But again, people can't get over, you gotta hold a stick over your head. I don't want to do that. It's part of the job, but there's so many other things.
Exactly. Well, if you could share some advice with a new boom op just getting started, what would you tell them?
I think watch movies, I think, is kind of the first thing that I would say to anybody, and kind of see how different directors handle sound in some ways. I know that there was an article that came out about how certain directors choose to have their scenes done in terms of dialogue. I would also say watch movies from different periods, because you can kind of hear the types of sound that was going on. Because originally back in the olden days, like, actors couldn't move around as much as they could, because you had mics that were just over top, or actual plant mics, and they needed to have that dialogue. I think having a certain amount of grace, and I don't mean just like physically, I mean understanding like as a whole what you're trying to do in terms of the collaboration of the project, and understanding that everybody is doing their job, hopefully to the best of their abilities with the materials that they have. Everybody's doing what the best they can, and to understand what every department is doing, and yes, not to get in the way. Again, I feel like I got weird vibes or bad vibes, or maybe the joke stuck a little bit too much of like sound being the redheaded stepchild in film school. And I mean, yeah, it's a joke somewhat, but at the same time, I think just having a more positive attitude in terms of the overall collaboration and just coming into it open and ready to learn and cooperate with other people too. I mean, it's like that whole thing of bees with honey rather than flies with vinegar. And I think it's easy to get when many times sound is not somebody's priority. It's easy to get a little to get hurt by that and take that somewhat in a personal way. And I think to try to look at it from a larger perspective, that it's not specifically about your job or what you're doing, but it's about that whole and trying to work within that to the best of your abilities. It's just a better way to think about it rather than I got lit out of the scene or they're framing me, this framing sucks or whatever. So that took me a tremendous while to learn, I think, and still does, because sometimes that's not always there, in terms of everybody meeting on that same level.
Yeah. All right. So what has been your all-time favorite project you've worked on?
I think the two big ones for me so far were Black Bear, which came out we shot it in 2019, and then it came out December 2020. And it was at Sundance and all of that stuff, which was great. I mean, I think there were a few things that I've worked on that have been at Sundance, but that one was like a big deal for me. It's a very meta type of film talking about art and whatnot. And then the other one was a film called Arch Enemy, which came out last year, I believe, and that premiered at Beyond Fest, which is a local festival here in Los Angeles, which is kind of science fiction-y, very genre type of themed, and I'm a big genre movie fan. So again, it goes back to like working on movies that you would see as yourself, like if you hadn't worked on it. So it's kind of garnering that kind of excitement, and that was a tremendous big thing for me in particular for Arch Enemy, of being at this festival, Beyond Fest, that is, and it was such a unique experience because it was 2020 and we were still kind of figuring the COVID thing out, and it was at a drive-through, which was kind of made it even more unique and amazing. So those ones, I think in particular, I hold in dear respect for, because again, I mean, I think I'm, as much as I try to deny it sometimes, I am here for the art, and I am here for the collaboration and making this thing that will last that you've done with all of these other people. I mean, and sometimes that doesn't happen. Sometimes things get shelved, or I mean, even not just movies, but I mean commercials and all these types of things. Sometimes it doesn't even see the light of day. So even the fact that it gets released is kind of a tiny miracle in itself. And in the context of like narratives and movies, there's a larger audience out there, hopefully, that more eyeballs will be there to see it. And whatever they think of it is their opinion, which is fine. But the fact that it gets displayed somewhere and is looked at and heard for however long, and that people can go back to it, whether it's as a hard copy, DVD, Blu-ray, or see it on streaming in some way, that's what's important to me. That's what I think. That's why art is important, and being a part of that is good.
Yeah. I worked on our project, and it was a guy that had been paralyzed, and he broke some speed records in a car that was built especially for him to drive, and it never came out. But it was like the coolest thing, and they...
See you talking about, I'm like, where is it? How do I see it?
Yeah,
That's
it was
unfortunate.
Really cool. So, but yeah, it's just that stuff, I saw a rough cut, and I was just like, oh man, this turned out, and I guess the project just kind of got scrapped,
Well, you know what you got to do then? You got to grab an executive producer thing and be like, all right, I'm picking up this movie and we're going to release it.
Yeah, no, that was pretty cool. All right, so we've talked about the best film ever or best project you worked on. What is the worst all-time experience you had on set? And you don't have to mention any names.
Again, it was the leadership from kind of the top level down of how things were being run. And yeah, and that affects everything. That is a trickle down of, you don't have somebody in their position of power who is kind of at the tiller of the boat, right? Steering where we need to go. Then we're all running around with our heads cut off trying to second guess what the next thing is. And then, the person in charge is like, why aren't we doing this thing that I want? And it's like, because you didn't talk about it. And I mean, for that one, it was the weather conditions as well. We were at the beach. It was hot, so you had to prep yourself for that. They parked the bathrooms very far away to the point where you had to golf cart there. Then there was only one golf cart. Just kind of silly, outrageous stuff where, again, it was one of those things where I had to kind of pro and con the situation of yes, this is okay money, but am I going to actually get worse at my job if I stay on this? Because if everybody's just in survival mode of just crawling along, trying to bear through this, what are we accomplishing and what are we doing as a whole? So that one, again, I was supposed to be on it for 2 weeks, but I guess, again, to give you an idea of how they had managed things. I guess they had booked a boom operator many, many months before because they were under the impression that this mixer would be on it, and then that mixer wasn't on it anymore, and they didn't tell the boom operator. So, and I think I found that out the night before I thought I was starting my second week, and I was just so relieved to find that. I mean, part of me was like, oh, well, I guess that I don't get paid for, but then at the same time, I was like, phew, I can do anything else, literally anything else, than go back to that set.
Oh, that's good. Well, are there any projects that we missed that you'd like to talk about?
Or you know what, I think there's a Skechers commercial that I worked on in December. Maybe that comes out at some point then. Again, I don't know. They don't tell me these things. Sometimes you don't know until you're watching TV, and then the ad pops up. You're like, I worked on that.
Well, how can people connect with you online? How can they find you?
So my Instagram is Steven Speeds Sound. It's kind of a mouthful, but I like the alliteration there. You got to have a good alliteration, I think, in today's marketing world, or not. And then the website that I have, if sound people still use, but I don't think they do. Or there's those other clients out there, they're like, let me see your reel. And I'm like, that's not how that works, but okay. But the website is StephenHarrodSound.com. That's got a link to the Instagram and some of the stuff that I've worked on, and the bio and all that standard stuff that you find. But the best place is usually my Instagram to follow what I'm doing or what I've done.
All right. Okay. Well, I want to say thanks to Stephen Harrod for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Michael.
And I'd like to say thanks to everyone for listening. If you have questions or would like us to discuss a particular topic, email us at locationsoundpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, remember, sound is half the picture.